Right, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to the Economic Development Committee meeting of the 15th of June. I just want to first off explain that the meeting has been recorded and is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. Just to explain the health and safety requirements, because we've got a few people here from the public today. So we've got these two exits here, actually we've got three exits here. So if we do have an emergency, we'll just ask you to follow Sarah or Hannah out if we do have an emergency. And we've also got a defibrillator on this floor if we have that unfortunate situation happen, but hopefully we won't have that. We just ask, we've also got one member of our council is online, and that's Renee Dingwall, which is great to have her online. And so anyone that is online, we just like to, if you could introduce yourselves before you are speaking and keep your camera on. That is all I need to talk about there. So first off, I'd just like to call for apologies. I've got apologies from Councillor Bowen and Councillor Johnson. Is there anything else? Sorry? And we've got Councillor Rutherford for lateness. Okay, I'll look to move those apologies, seconded by Councillor Dennison. If we could look to vote, please. That's passed with 13 votes for and none against. Thank you. So first off, today with the factories presentation, we had yesterday, Nick let me know that he was sick, so he is an apology today, Nick from the factory, so that is now not going ahead. So our first presentation today is from Manawatu Tech from Steve. So Steve, if you can come up to the table and introduce yourself, and you've got 10 minutes, Steve, so just wait for Hannah. Hannah will just get your presentation up, and then you've been explained the traffic light system, so you know you've got 10 minutes, and when it gets to orange you've got 3, and then that'll be it. And I'll give you, can't see me, I'll try and give you a signal to say that you're nearly finished, and then when you get to 10 I'll just tell you that you're over. But hopefully you'll have enough time for us to ask you some questions, Steve. Okay, we're ready to go.
Slides. Hi all, I'm Steve from Manawatu Tech Collective, if you haven't met me before, a few familiar faces from around. We're an industry association that supports the 116 tech companies in the region. And when we started this 2 years ago, I had no idea that there was so many. So the tech sector here is broad and deep. We've got at least one of everything here, ranging across the spectrum of tech. So there's a dozen ag tech companies like Levno and Green Tech Robotics. And many of these are Internet of Things companies. They make physical devices with electronics inside and the software to collect and display data. But the high-tech hardware sector is more than just ag tech. There's companies like PEC and Beta Solutions and Frog Parking. So together, this type of company appears to be our local speciality, this high-tech hardware. But there's quite a bunch of others. There's product companies like Author and Maimahi and Objective and Stock Trim. So they're software as a service companies. They're based here. So they make software that you can rent, to manage your data and automate business processes. There's some other big companies like Plumbing World and Property Brokers and FMG that have got their corporate support here. And there's tertiary government health are large employers here also. And we've got dozens of support services companies like Yorb and Trio and Advantage that build websites or make your mobile app or keep your computers running or your internet connected, or they provide consulting support for larger IT projects. Let's see if I can work this. So tech is consistently one of the top 3 exporters for New Zealand. So tech is in red on that graph, if that's too small for you to read at a distance, behind dairy in blue and tourism in yellow. Tech had 8.6 billion in export revenue in 2021 for New Zealand. Many of our local tech companies bring in that export revenue. A couple of companies here have no New Zealand customers or no local customers because their product is so specialised. So ITL and Electric Memory are examples of that. And I spoke with, is it Aidan last week who's doing his project? So we sent him a list of companies to try, and we've offered him some meetings to come and talk so that he can get more traction locally. And we'll continue to help him until his research is done, and we're very interested in the result of that. So we estimate local companies create around 1,300 local tech jobs at an average salary of $94,000. And that's not including additional non-technical support staff like receptionists and marketing and admin and managers and stuff like that. We don't currently have a good estimate of how many remote tech jobs are in town, but I'm currently running a survey and we'll find that out in a week or two. So this slide is from a salary survey we did in November, so we run this every year. The employment situation in town is dire. On the right-hand side, you can see we're losing skilled staff to other regions and to remote work. So big national companies come in and they tempt our people away with higher salaries and generous funding for home offices. And most local companies would hire more tech staff if we could find them. I guesstimate there's 50 to 100 unadvertised tech vacancies in town. It's probably a lot higher, I was being conservative. Where if the right person came along, they'd be snapped up just like that. And I'll give you an example of that in a minute. You might have seen a version of this Maslow's triangle around, Wi-Fi is a basic human need. But I think this works for business as well. I think a lack of tech staff slows the local economy. It's once you've got the basic needs of your business, building, power, plumbing, internet, staff, plant, product, all that kind of stuff, the next thing you want is to find more customers or to increase efficiency. And tech is very often the first tool you reach for, the enabler for that. So without enough tech people in the region, without enough tech people to build and run the tech, local growth is constrained. So Manawa Tech's putting a lot of work into solutions for this. So I'll tell you a story to illustrate. So this is Gray. I first met her at one of our regular tech meetups that we run in town. We have a slot called Lost and Found. It's a kind of programmer's joke. I'll explain it later. Where if you're looking for work, you stand up and say what you can do and what you're interested in. And if you're a company looking to hire, you stand up and say what you need. At almost every meeting, we make a match of some kind. So Gray came to our software developers meetup on a Thursday, sent me a CV on a Friday, took it with me when I visited Levno on the Monday, and she had a job offer on Tuesday. She still had 2 papers to go at Massey, but it was her dream job, so she jumped for it. She's studying part-time. It's awesome, mate. But that's just a sign of how tight the market is. And Levno advertised for 3 tech vacancies at the end of May. So part of our vision for Manawa Tech is to make the Manawatu an excellent place to have a career in tech. So we've built a ton of tools to help us do this. So our website lists all the tech companies in town, tagged by the tools that they use and the services that they offer. And this gets used in a few different ways. So it helps local businesses in the city to buy IT services locally. So if you can encourage local businesses as you're out there, go and have a look on our website if they need IT services, because we're well capable. And we used to hear of Massey students leaving town after they finished their studies because they thought that there were only 2 tech companies in town. Actually, no, there's lots. So now they can see them all, and we've got a number of other ways that we reach into the tertiary sector to sloop up this fresh young talent and help them get jobs or projects or whatever they're interested in. Our website's got a tech ecosystem map so that council and others can see what we've actually got here, who are the companies in town. And we track industry statistics for that purpose as well, so just click on our site there, reasonably up front. We run a CV database for free to help connect workers to work because there's no tech recruiters in town. We offer a free mentoring program to build local talent. We support schools to build the future. I've just driven around the region dropping off 70 trophies for excellence in IT for students. It was a really nice drive, actually. Saw some parts of the region I hadn't seen before. And we've got a long list of resources for teachers to dip into as they build the next generation. We coordinated Tech Week this year, had 8 outstanding events in the city. And my first slide today was a shot from the mega meetup. Brent was there, thank you very much for coming along. So I think there was 120 people in total at that event. So we support regular monthly meetups in town to encourage cross-pollination of ideas and sharing resources. So we're trying to build community and get the whole ecosystem working together as one thing. And all of this together gives our region the visible mass to pull in national speakers like Amazon and Microsoft and work with national entities like IT Professionals and NZ Tech. And I was talking with the CEO of IT Professionals this morning. So just because Manawa Tech exists, they want to talk to us, they think we're worth talking to. We support a startup ecosystem here with a tech co-founders database and connections to the factory and Sprout and the Young Chamber, and we're often referring people to each other. And we tell the story of tech to anyone who listens. So thanks very much for listening. It's an honour to be here. We're building a database of local stories of local tech companies that we use to promote the region. So this is used in a number of ways. It gives people coming into the region a feel for what it's like to live and work here. It's good for students as well. And it gives potential customers of these companies an idea of the talent we have and the capability here and the kinds of problems that we're good at solving. So that's some of our tools and strategies to build the tech scene in the region and make an attractive place for people to have a career here. Manawa Tech is industry-led and industry-funded. On this slide are the companies who pay an annual membership to help us keep doing what we do. I think Palmy's just the right size. Something like Manawa Tech can work well here. It's big enough to have a thriving and diverse tech industry with everything you need in walking distance, and small enough to be a welcoming community where it's easy to connect with each other. We help each other out. We deliver projects together like the Glowworm Bike Light. We celebrate each other's successes, like Advantage won a National Innovation Award in May. So we value your support and interest. It's been great to see Councillor Brent and others and the Mayor at a few of our events. Follow us on LinkedIn if you want to keep up to date. You're welcome to come along. Our dream is to see a thriving and a well-connected tech community here in the Manawa too. So over to you for questions now.
Thank you, Steve. It's great. I just want to ask, I want to ask the first question and then see if there's other questions coming in. How much is membership?
It varies depending on the size of the company, 300 for a 1 to 3 person, up to 3,000 for a bigger one.
Okay. And how many members have you got?
29 member companies. So that's a quarter of the market here.
What's your ambition? How many do you want?
Just enough to keep doing what we're doing, really.
So how many can you cope with?
All of them. Actually, I try and visit all the companies once a year, and I'm not really keeping up because there's too many.
Okay, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Steve, for taking up the invite to present here. Painted a really clear picture of some of the activity and value that's being created there. I guess at this stage, do you have a kind of an ask and or a key message for Council in terms of what we need to have on our radar looking kind of 1 to 5 years ahead?
An ask for Council, yes, please promote local tech companies. And we've got a few things cooking away, so maybe I could come back in a year or so with a bigger, harder ask, maybe. Cheeky question.
Thank you.
The Mayor.
Thanks, Steve, and I just acknowledge Nick in the gallery as well, who's a local tech owner. So you spoke, Steve, around there's no specialist tech recruitment. So are you saying that the traditional sort of recruitment companies focus on the mainstream, but there's nobody concentrating on tech, digital IT companies? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, correct. Auckland, Whaley, Christchurch, you've got specialist companies that understand IT well.
And do those companies plunder us, or do they help us? Okay.
Not much help from a regional perspective because they don't...
Come up, Nick.
Sorry. They don't have any contacts in the region, and so they don't know companies or people here, but also there's not a great deal of plundering as such either. But that is no guarantee of future activity, as more and more companies like out of Wellington and Auckland are quite happy to have more and more workers remote, which can be a good thing for the council to have lots of workers here working around the country, but not so good for local businesses.
Right.
Sorry, Nick, just for those online, do you want to introduce who you are? Just say your name and what business you're from.
I'm Nick Crossman. I'm the chairman of Manawa Tech, but my business is Trio Technology, located in Victoria Ave.
Thank you. Just the people online who wouldn't have a clue who you were,
Sure.
So thank you for that.
So is Manawa Tech sort of filling a bit of that gap? Are you in terms of trying to facilitate, like a tech Tinder?
Ish, yeah, we've got a CV database it only takes 3 minutes to put your profile in, and then we try and act as a bit of a matchmaker. So often people ask me, "Do you know anyone who can X?" And I'll try and connect people up.
Right. Okay.
As an example, I'm looking for a junior developer or graduate developer right now. I went to Manawa Tech, of course, and we're interviewing one local graduate UCOL tomorrow.
Right.
So again, it's about getting the tools used and out there and aware of that. So we need, it's a chicken and egg. You've got to have candidates in the database, and you've also got to have employers looking in there as well. So.
Yeah. So one more question. So are and this sort of what your answer sort of has helped us. So are our local tertiary providers like UCOL to become Te Pukenga and Massey and even IPU, are they helping? Are they providing what you need in terms of the training to graduates?
Yes.
So yes, definitely, yeah. And we actually are working very closely with UCOL on a number of initiatives, and we have Jasmine Groves on the board of Manotech.
Okay.
So, but as far as actually qualified graduates graduating from these institutions, yes, they generally are.
There's just not enough of them.
No.
Okay. Well, so I suppose it's positive, but obviously you need more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam
Final
Chair.
question from Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Steve. I have 2-3 questions. I saw the member companies or your members on the. Is it by invitation or by expression of interest? Your membership.
Either way.
Okay. Is there a reason why Messi is not there?
They're not a paying member. They're not a paying member or a partner. So those companies you saw on the screen were paid up members of Manotech.
Yeah, that's what my question is. Have you approached Messi to join you?
Yes, many times.
Yes.
Yeah, we
But they
can't
are
find
not
the right
willing
person
to.
to talk to yet.
I
We'd
think
love
that's
to.
been answered, Councillor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
My second question is, the resource we are producing through UCOL on Messi, do you think that's enough for your demand, or are you still looking overseas for experts?
There's always never enough candidates for any position, and given the number of jobs on the jobs database in Manotech at the moment, there aren't enough qualified people for the roles we have. Obviously, no one's currently looking overseas. It's been very hard for the last 2 years, so it's hard to sort of say what the future holds.
Okay.
A lot of jobs go unadvertised as well.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Steve and Nick, for both coming in. It's been really good to hear your presentation today, so thank you very much. I'd like to move this presentation, seconded by Councillor Dennison, and I'll look forward for any comments. Thank you. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, thanks, Steve. Thank you, Nick, for giving us a little insight to what the tech sector is doing in the Manawatu. I was really interested to hear the amount of export work that's going on, and I know the Chamber have an intern that's working on an export project just to highlight the amount of exporters that there are in our city. And tech is another example of that happening. And it's great that we've got CEDA just in front of you, our Economic Development Agency, to hear some of the activity that's going on in that technical and digital space. I think that the real key thing is to show more is some case studies of what people are doing. I know Objective, I know about Levno and the old Gallagher's PEC, ITL. I mean, there's some pretty amazing companies there that are doing great work in different sectors, and often we get missed out because we're regional New Zealand. So, thank you for highlighting it, and it is something that I think the case studies could do a lot more to tell that what is somewhat an unknown story at this stage. But great work, thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and much like the Mayor, I'd like to echo the acknowledgement of Manawatech and what you've achieved over a couple of years from really just rolling sleeves up and connecting in this community. It's been really awesome to see. Certainly when I first went along, I was quite surprised and hugely encouraged to see the scope of what was actually there and the potential, I think, is As a city, we're in quite a sweet spot, I think, in terms of the size of the city, the proximity to educational facilities. Obviously, that's got a bit of a two-edged sword for the companies locally in terms of remote working coming into the scene. But certainly, building community in that context and getting some profile up and beyond the region is going to be really helpful in terms of that. And just want to acknowledge Manawa Tech for what they're doing. Wish them well for the future and encourage them to stay in touch with all of council and with CETA as we continue to work forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I offer the invitation for you to come back in a year's time. We look forward to seeing you back here again in a year. So thank you. On that note, we'll look to vote. That's passed with 13 votes to nil, so we'll look to move to the next item, which is CETA. So we'll look for Jerry. Are you coming up on your own? And we'll welcome Bobby, the chair. Just say hello to you, Bobby, or are you coming up? Nice to see you, Bobby.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just to let you know that Steve and I are down to meet next week, so we're going to pick up a conversation next week. So thank you for the opportunity to catch up again. I know I presented to this committee early on in my tenure, so it's been really good to be back again in front of you, just looking at how we've been progressing over the last wee while. So look, CETA, I want to just talk a little bit about our inward investment approach. I guess in a sense, inward investment from an economic development agency is not all created equally. So there's different tiers and different approaches that we've taken for the organisation going forward. And then I just want to briefly update you on a couple of the key projects that we've got going on in the organisation at the moment. So we've got a sort of a four-tiered approach, and I guess the way that we arrange ourselves is sort of determined a little bit by our scale, the need for some of the key projects to have expert leadership with subject matter expertise involved, so that we can take those forward. And then we have projects that are off scale, projects that are a little bit off scale but smaller or ad hoc and smaller, and then some of the developments we have in terms of investment from a third-party delivery perspective. So the first ones are our project-based, I guess, inward investment approaches. So these are key strategic projects that have been prioritised through to our statement of intent and the letter of expectation that we receive every year. And so we typically look to link these to that. They require a level of detail and a level of understanding that can't be provided, I guess, by a generic, inward investment lead. So we traditionally have these led out by, I guess, contractors who come in and do the work for us and take those projects forward. So at the moment, we've got a couple of those going on, which is the Central New Zealand Distribution Hub and the food strategy. So they're very, very key projects for us, and they're of great scale and very, very important to the region's economic development. The second tier is what we call ad hoc and of scale. So these are larger projects that are already known but haven't got a strategic lead in them, so are led pretty much by me. So for instance, we are part of setting the scene for those sorts of things, so like Harunga. We've been doing a bit of work in the recent times around the repurposing of the old Gorge Road in terms of what that might look like in terms of a mountain bike trail. So they're the sorts of projects that we would have in my purvey to look after. So these often arise sort of ad hoc ways through leads that are provided often by people around this table, the shareholders, the stakeholders, or other individuals in the region who give us a bit of a steer of what's going on and that we need to keep our eye on. These projects progress at their own pace in a sense because they do need sometimes to have preliminary investigations. And what we look to do with these projects is once we move an anchor project off to a business as usual approach, we might look to see with the shareholders whether we can fund these at a strategic level. So they're very, very important projects that haven't quite reached that level yet. The third tier is the ad hoc and smaller projects. So these are smaller opportunities for inward investment, that we might pick up traditionally in our business support team. So when they go out and they talk to industry sectors or indeed companies around the region, they just might look at what it is that they need to do in terms of taking their company from, say, I guess, an IP to a startup or a startup to a scale-up, and we look at how we might move those forward. So that's often, existing companies or companies that are here that are looking to expand, or it might sometimes be new companies as well. We can't forget the fourth tier, which is our third-party relationships we have with places like the factory or Sprout. So these are, for us, organisations that CEDA invests in, but they have an inward investment function in what they do. So we claim a little bit of the setting the scene for those companies to succeed by having that handshake introduction to them, to Sprout and to the factory. So these are entrepreneurs or companies that are wishing to take, their IP and turn it, as I said earlier, into a scalable business. In that way, we have access to experts in those organisations. They also have access to funding streams which we haven't got necessarily, so they can help those companies go from startup to growth. So this is just a little table of the sorts of projects that we have in the space. So for example, the project-led ones which have got the key subject matter experts, Te Tanganui is a really good example of this, the Central New Zealand Distribution Hub. So that project is well advanced. It's been going along for a number of years. It's going from a phase now of being prepared for a big drive in inward investment. The second one is the food strategy, which is in a much more embryonic stage of its development. In fact, the lead committee had its draft of the first cut of the strategy yesterday. So that will be going to the CEDA board probably at the July meeting to see what happens with that next. Secondly, are the ad hoc and off-scale things. I've referred to a couple of these. The old hotel conversation is back on the table again. We've had some discussions around that with a number of people around this table, and just seeing what's in that space, what the post-COVID recovery for that sector looks like. I've mentioned the Te Apiti Gorge. We're talking again with Soundsphere around what options there might be with one of the local tertiary providers in the city. ADA headquarters across the road from us at CEDA. The third tier, of course, is the ad hoc and small. So we're talking about things like Beam Scooter or Tussock Line or Plant Tech. And then finally, a list on there of the recent Sprout Accelerator programs and the last accelerator in the city. So, there's a good list of companies there that, through CEDA's sponsorship and part of Sprout and the factory, that we have some, claim on that as well. Just a couple of slides on updates for the two key projects. Te Tanganui, as I've just mentioned, is getting really close to having its final collateral ready and a website up for July. We're planning for that launch in July. There's been a bit of a final looking at the needs analysis of potential investors into that project, specifically around what commercial model they're looking for, which will have a bit of, guidance for what the city might do in terms of its future planning. Then we're going to move fully on into inward investment, and inside that there's three key work streams. One resides with the council around the master plan. CEDA's leading out inward investment, and between us we're looking at how we advocate and share the comms for that very important project. As I said earlier, the food strategy was tabled at the lead team yesterday. It's done exactly what it says on the tin in terms of getting the existing, lay of the land for the science and innovation layout for the city. It's looked at some of the international models for how this would look, and stage two, which we're currently scoping, will look to put the New Zealand and Manawatu context squarely over that work, which has been done by an international consultant for us. And finally, just a few things about how we get involved in these conversations. So we are very much the handshaker, the connector. So we look to invest the CEDA staff time. We provide advice and support for those individuals, companies and potential investors. We can fund some small projects in a specific way. We do that handshake and introduction. We often talk and look at seeking project or proof of concept funding for people. So that's important just to see whether the conversations we're having with them have got fruit that might be born from it. We look for investments for key projects, and finally we promote the region and profile sectors and businesses to encourage people to come to the city. So in lieu of the traffic lights not working, I'm just going to assume my time is done.
Thank you, Jerry. There is a couple of questions. I just want to ask one myself. The difference between Tier 3 and Tier 4, would there be any confusion between what's in your space and what's in the factory space?
No, not really. So the Sprout one's really clear because they go straight to them. We have a great relationship with the factory, and I meet with Nick regularly. So the way it usually works is they will have their own generated opportunities, but sometimes we pass people that come to us through the business team on to them, so then they become a factory client. Yep.
And my second question's around the hotel. Is that at business case stage or where?
Oh, no. So this came about from my first week on the job, having a chat actually to Janet around what are a couple of things that are percolating away that aren't on the top list. And one of them was the hotel discussion. It's more about, in fact, I had a conversation this morning with NZTE around the work they did on Project Palace and how out of date that is, or what the current invigoration of that conversation is post-COVID. So it's just at the point now of, trying to work out whether there's any, meat on those bones to start looking at again.
Thank you, Jerry. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Bobby and Jerry and Paul and Janet. It's good to see you here. I know a little bit more about some of the stuff because we had our lead team meeting just the other day. But look, the same question as the chair around the tiers and the fourth tier. Would Accelerate 25, the regional growth plan, would that sort of fit into that, like a partner in that third party space?
I guess they are in a sense, but I see them more, and we have regular meetings with them now actually with the other two EDAs close to us, so Horowhenua Company and Wanganui Partners. They've been very good for us in terms of particularly conversations like Te Iu Tanganui around trying to pitch it as a trans-central sort of a project rather than just a Manawatu project. So I think that ability of having that one voice is really, really helpful. So I see them more as an advocate rather than a tier 3.
Right, yep. Okay. And just one more question around the Central New Zealand Distribution Hub, Te Iu Tanganui. The launch in July, that's going to be more to the sector rather than to us. It'll be, I'm picking, is that right? Like so to the logistics companies, the people we're looking to invest in it?
Yep. So we're just working through at the moment with the City Council around an invite list. And this morning I had a meeting with David Bennett, and I was talking to him. He's the national spokesperson for, obviously, logistics and economic development, and he was very, very interested in coming along, so I've just added him to the list with Janet. So to me, it's a broad list of influential, ministers, local companies, and everybody in between.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's all the questions. So thank you very much for presenting. Oh, sorry. Councillor Barrett hasn't gone into the queue.
Sorry, I had tried to get in the queue and then forgot to try again after I got finally the opportunity to. May I ask a question,
Yes,
Madam Chair?
You are very welcome, Councillor
Oh, thank
Barrett.
you. Thanks, Jerry, and thanks, Bobby, for being there in support. Really interested around the Tier 4 space. Firstly, can you talk us through a little bit about how prioritization happens in there from a CETA point of view?
In terms of putting projects through to them? Or
yeah, kind of what prioritization system do you run to work out what comes into that space?
So I guess it's on a needs basis, on a case-by-case basis with the business team talking to individual opportunities, and then they would be discussed with either, probably in the most instances, the factory rather than Sprout, because I think, as I said earlier, the primary industries type relationships with Sprout are direct with the individuals. So the business team led by Nats would, I guess, put a ruler across the needs of each of the interactions they have, and then on a case-by-case basis pass those on to the factory.
Thank you. And then in terms of, you indicated that as a kind of funding support was the headline there, but what else comes through by way of support? Is there advisory service or networking service, or what else comes?
Oh, there's absolutely that through us. Absolutely. We ride, if we put someone in touch with the factory or indeed Sprout, we run side saddle with them in terms of the business team providing support. And indeed through, when it gets to it, the marketing and comms team providing exposure for those companies.
Thank you. And finally, is how do you end up measuring success in that space? Is it kind of numbers of dollars of inbound investment? Is it numbers of new startups, is it?
It's number of new startups, yep. So we would, I think it's in every cohort, for example, Sprout takes, I think it's 12 new inductees into their Accelerate program. And so we like to see how many of those go from that program through to being fully fledged, yep.
Cool. And just to understand, not to preempt your conversation next week with Steve, but kind of how much of that prioritization kind of space recognizes, I guess, where we do have active kind of business ecosystems that are potentially a resource as well?
Well, look, I think Steve's organisation does a fantastic job at the start, and I think when you can get in front of someone like Manawa Tech and look at how they run their, I guess, getting those number of companies together and it's all going in the same direction, in the same waka, it makes it really easy to provide support for them. So we'll be looking to see whether we can identify other clusters of really like-minded people working together, because I think that's critical to economic development.
Cool. Thank you very much to both of you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, and thanks to the team from CEDA for coming in as well. So thank you very much, Jerry and Bobby. Great. Okay, I will look to move that, and seconded by Councillor Dennison. So we'll look to see if there's any comment. Thanks, the Mayor.
Sorry, Madam Chair, there's something going on with these electronic devices. Look, I just want to comment and thank CEDA. Economic development is a long game, and for some time it has been a little bit we've been unaware of exactly the approach, certainly in this case around inward investment. And I think the tiers approach makes it a bit clearer for us as governors, and also those strategic projects, specifically around Te Utanganui, the Central New Zealand Distribution Hub, and the food strategy, which is a big piece of work. We're starting to hit some, there is some milestones starting to be hit. And just on the distribution hub one, I do absolutely implore you to make sure that the sector is included. To date, everything's been done around local government and iwi in an inward-looking focus. It needs to be, if this project is to succeed, it's got to be the investors that are coming. So that is truly the private sector. So that's your ports, that's your logistics, your freight forwarding companies, and everybody in between, including developers. So they all need to hear and see the master plan at work. It's very exciting, and along with food is our world-class offering. So thank you to the team. It's looking really good, and thanks for the update. Thank you.
Just to reiterate that, it's really good to see this in a transparent way, so to see the tier levels, because that's what we haven't seen before, so good to see the projects being explained in this way, but also to see the way in which you have explained it to us. So thank you very much for doing that today, and it's really nice to see this in a concise way, so thank you very much for bringing that to the table. Thank you. We'll look to vote. That has passed with one abstention from the Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Right, we'll now look to move on to the minutes, which is...
Madam Chair, sorry, just with the order of business, I just wondered if you just wanted to go through 2, 3 and 4.
I did discuss that with the governance manager.
Oh, sorry.
We will do that since you brought it up. Do you have any conflicts, and do you want to discuss the apologies, and do you have any notification of additional items? No? No.
Just thought, I don't know if we needed to follow through with that formally.
Okay. We have discussed we have brought the apologies out, but we haven't voted on it. We did. Yeah. Yeah, so we didn't bring up notification of additional items. Does anybody have any additional items? We didn't bring up declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? And there's no public comment, so thank you for that, Councillor Dennison. Right, now we'll move on to confirmation of the minutes. So we'll just look at page 13 of your agenda.
Sorry, Madam Chair, could an apology for lateness be recorded in the minutes for me? Thanks. I text at 8:48.
Yes, Councillor Hancock, it can be. Okay, I look to move the minutes, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. If we can look to vote on the minutes, please. Right, that has passed with one extension. Thank you. Right, we'll now move to item number 9. Before we start item number 9, I'd like to hand it over to Mr Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So item number 9 is going to be presented by Peter Crawford and Kian Lee. So just before they come down, there's a couple of, I guess, updates I'd like to provide in terms of the personnel working on economic development for the city. So sadly, this will be Peter Crawford's last day or last presentation to the Economic Development Committee. So Peter's finishing up with the council at the end of June after a long period, about 15 years, I think, Peter. So Peter's been a long-serving and loyal council employee. He's been a true public servant and provided apolitical advice on economic monitoring, regardless of whether that news is good, bad or in between. And I think during that course of that 15 years, Peter, we've had a little bit of good, a little bit of bad, a little bit in between. And I'm sure you're going to tell us shortly about what you think is going to happen shortly as well, looking ahead. So, yeah, Peter's been a fantastic employee. I think it's very fitting that Cheryl Bryant, the Assistant Chief Executive, is here this afternoon as well, because Peter worked with Cheryl and alongside Cheryl in the unit for a number of years. Unfortunately, Julie McDonald, Peter's immediate manager, was unavailable this afternoon. So, yeah, Peter, you also have a fantastic reputation out there amongst the business community as well. So your work has been very much appreciated by myself and my predecessor sitting alongside me here. So also just to acknowledge Kian Lee, who'll be co-presenting with Peter this afternoon. So Kian's been appointed to a new role, Policy Analyst, Research and Monitoring. So he'll be supporting across the board with a focus on economic data. Just to be aware that we are still recruiting for a city economist, so applications have just closed for that. So that's the role to replace Peter. So yeah, over to you, Peter and Kian.
Thanks very much for that introduction. Kian is going to start off with the running through the presentation once that's on the screen.
Ena mana, ena reo, ena karangatanga maha. Kai te mehi, kai te mehi, kai te mehi. E mehi ana ki a rangitane e pupuri I te Maori o te whenua. Ki te marae o hine ta koto mai. E te tiamana, kai konehira hapeta tēnā koe, e te kahika Mia Smith, e ngā kai konehira tēnā koutou, ko Kian aho, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. I will quickly run through the slides that I have prepared together with Peter. So in terms of our gross domestic product, in terms of the annual change, for the last 3.5 years or so, we have been trending above the New Zealand average, or the New Zealand rate. And it is not uncommon, as we see in the past, there were periods where we are actually trending below that rate. But for the last 3.5 years, we have been above that rate. There's been a drop in the first parts of the year, mainly because we were in traffic light system red, so that could have contributed to that. In terms of the people on job seeker benefits, we see that COVID has affected that, and with the rise in 2020, but currently now we have recovered. In terms of the people on work-ready benefits, we have come down to, in fact, better than what we were pre-COVID. However, in terms of people getting benefit due to health condition or disability, there was a gradual climb during the COVID period, and there is a lag, or it's taking a slightly longer time for us to recover in that space, but it is also trending downwards. In terms of our retail spending recorded through electronic card spending across the city, we see that comparing to the situation we were 3 years ago, we have been consistently above the New Zealand rate of change, which is a good sign, and we have been tracking positive or above that rate for the last 2.5 years or so, which is comforting. In terms of delegate days, we see that the first quarter of 2020, we were affected by the traffic light system, as well as we were still in red for most parts of it. And as a result of that, you can see that quarter one of 2022, compared to the running 7 quarters or so, this is the lowest. But a short conversation with John Lynch from Conferences Facilities shows that, tell us that the second part of 2020, we would see, expecting to see record high in terms of delegate days. In terms of annual building consents for new residential dwellings, we see that we have been trending upwards since 2014, and we see that we are on an all-time high, although there's been a volatility in the last 3 months or so, mainly due to consents of larger multi-unit dwellings, which it takes time to process or to prepare, as well as uncertainty due to supply chain issues. So that volatility is quite normal, as you can see. But we are coming down a bit from an all-time high as well in terms of the consents for new residential dwellings. In terms of the value of building consents, here we are presenting the value for residential buildings, which include new as well as altered, meaning refurbishments, let's say by Kayanga Ora for their older units, as well as for the commercial buildings as well. We see that because we're presenting new and altered, we see that the value is buffered compared to if we were just to report on residential new buildings. And not included in this trend are also other projects that are in the pipeline in terms of commercial projects or non-residential buildings, including projects such as the new Manukura School that will be built, as well as the new mental health facility for the hospital that will be built. So we can see that the trend would potentially still be trending upwards. In terms of average property value, we see that for the last year or so, property prices is trending up. But for the last 4 months or so, you can see that there is a short dip in a gentle slope for the last 3 months or so in Palmerston North. It is comforting to see that the gap between average property value of Palmerston North compared to New Zealand is widening, which indicates that Palmerston North will still remain attractive as a place to relocate to in terms of property prices. In terms of the changes of market trends, or in terms of property value, we see a sharp decline of our property value. And the contrast here is that there is relatively not as lag in terms of the rental value. And it is quite typical for rents not to reflect that change because of the nature of the rental market. And as you can see from the past, that there will be a lag and there would be a inertia in terms of the rate of change. So here we see that for the recent month in May, for the first time for many years, the house property value has gone below the change for rental value. And I will hand over to Peter for the rest of the presentation.
There is significant pressure on the rental market. The Kāinga Ora waiting list is now nearly 800 households. So that had flattened a little while with the Soho housing filling a little bit of that gap, but that's accelerated again. I've been following housing affordability for a long period, since the late 80s, and there's always been a question as to how far the housing market can continue to rise faster than incomes. In 1985, the average house was 3 times the average household income. Now it's nationally is 8.8 times. But a key factor that's allowed that housing debt to grow from 21 billion back in 1990 to 350 billion has been that decline in interest rates. The red line is the floating mortgage rate, which is usually the highest one. The green line is the latest estimate for the actual interest paid by households on the mortgages. And that dropped quite a bit in the last couple of years because of the Reserve Bank pouring $50 billion into the banks at a negative interest rate. But they're in the process from next month starting to withdraw that money, $5 billion a year initially. And so that is starting to push interest rates back up again, and those interest rates will continue to rise as households begin to move off those low fixed rates onto higher interest rates. So that raises some interesting questions about the future of house prices, whether this will be actually a plateauing. Reserve Bank's forecasting a 14% decline in prices from the November 21 peak, which would leave nationally about 1% of households in negative equity. But it's really just hard to know how that's going to work out over the next year or 2 years. But a lot of that for existing homeowners doesn't actually affect us, whether, because last year we had 39% increase in house values, and so it doesn't really affect most households if that drops. The other positive, there's been a bit of talk about some drops in commodity prices for dairy, but the red line is actually what gets paid to the New Zealand producers. And over the years, those lines have been diverging as the New Zealand dollar has appreciated against other currencies and has actually widened quite substantially. But the reason it hasn't has begun to narrow is the New Zealand dollar is beginning to drop. So that's actually providing quite a lot of support for this region and will continue to provide strong returns into dairy and meat processing. So just really wanting to provide that outlook. The construction is supporting growth. There's a little bit of uncertainty about that short-term drop in consents. It is encouraging to see some resource consents data showing that Kāinga Ora is actually beginning to move more quickly to actually bring projects forward. I'm not sure for the timing of that. Export commodity prices are at high levels, and that's going to continue to support growth in the region. There is some risk. There are people talking recession. Some economists looked at that downturn in retail spending in the March quarter and blamed that on recession, but of course that was a red traffic light setting and the impact it had on the whole events sector and a lot of households having to isolate because either they had COVID or a family member had it. And so the June quarter is looking much better than the March quarter. A lot of pressure on low-income households. We've seen rents growing locally at over 10% a year for the last 3 years. A lot of stories of businesses struggling to bring people to the region, employees to the region because they're really struggling to find housing, and of course the energy and food. And ongoing concerns about the settings for skilled migrants. The income thresholds are based on a national average, but because businesses here pay below the average, that makes it a bit harder for them to actually qualify to bring in migrants. So that will put more pressure on wages and it will be constraining the growth of some businesses in the region. We're both happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll just look around the room, see if there's any questions. I think, Peter, because some of us had heard your presentation the other day,
Yes.
you might have answered some of those questions the other day.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like there's any questions. But I just want to say personally, thank you very much, Peter, for everything that you have done for us. So thank you very much for everything you have done. Thank you.
I'd also like to, because not all councillors were on the Joint Strategic Committee meeting, want to just express my appreciation. I felt very privileged to be in this role. It's a very rare role in local government. And when I started here, Cheryl broadened the strategic part of that. So it is really influential within the council and outside of the community, and I've really appreciated the privilege of having that job.
Thank you, Peter. Right, thank you, everyone. Well, we'll look to look to move this, seconded by Councillor Dennison. So we'll look to a comment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I should just, on behalf of the elected members, thank you, Peter, and Kyan, just a lovely mihi there at the start too. Congratulations, well done. And but Peter, look, on behalf of the elected members, we've really valued having that independent advice from that sort of economist level. I think I called you a statistician at one stage, and I got told off. So I apologise for that. But seriously, we have appreciated, and right up until today, we've appreciated the firm, independent advice we get. As David alluded to, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, and sometimes it's in the middle. Fortunately, while I've been in this seat, it's been relatively good. So, but there are some headwinds there which you are just warning us of. But look, thank you for continuing that, and we look forward to the team producing further reports to us. It's pretty valuable. It helps us with our, just gives us a steer with some decision making as well. Thank you.
With that, we'll look to vote. Thank you. That's passed unanimously. Thanks for that. Right, we'll look to item number 8, which is the tourism sector profile and governance sector profile. So that's you, Peter, and Janet. It's page 35.
We normally take the report as read. Janet had quite a significant input into the content of the profile, so I wanted to acknowledge her role and have her to answer questions. But I just wanted to start with a quick observation. I present in lots of different forums, and there's usually a lot of surprise among local people when I suggest we're a significant tourist destination. And that was why I added on to page 7 the UN definition of the purpose of visiting. And if you look at through those categories, all of those are relevant to the city. The regions that rely very much on holiday travel are the ones that are really struggling, and reliant on overseas labour, short-term labour to meet those seasonal peaks. Because of the breadth of reasons for why people come here, we have almost no seasonality. There's just people in the city every day spending, and that's a real strength for us. So happy to answer any questions.
Yes, and there is some questions. The Mayor.
Sorry, this is one of my favourite subjects, that's all. Sorry, I just got a comment. Well, actually not comment, I'll leave that till later. Just questions. So can I ask why, and I think you sort of alluded a little bit to it yourself, Peter, in your comment around what the UN defined as tourism activities. Would it be fair to say that we are more of it's visitor activity rather than pure tourism? Because some people have different connotations of what that means.
Well, the UN says that it is tourism. Tourism is the process of travelling from where you live to another destination for a particular activity that isn't work-related. So people, and I think the problem with our national tourism data is visit arrivals coming here have to choose between ticking visiting friends and family or holiday. And because so many New Zealanders now live overseas and so many overseas people now live here, that has been such a growing influence of travel. It's a holiday, but and those people don't spend as much on a daily basis, but they stay much longer.
Yeah.
And we saw that during COVID. Our tourism spending in the city has only dropped about 30% because a lot of those people have stayed. Yeah.
And I'll just add to that, it was very hotly debated between Peter and I around calling this the tourism profile or the visitor economy. And I think obviously we leant towards the tourism profile, which was Peter's recommendation, and I do agree. But when we're talking about this, particularly out in the community and with stakeholders, we talk about the visitor economy because otherwise I think people still think of tourism as tour buses and,
exactly.
prizes and things. So we don't really use that language, but I think for the purpose of this report, it aligns with, the national definitions, but it's probably the only place we'd really use that language.
Yeah, and just a couple more questions, Madam Chair. The infographics are good on that page, our page 40, your page 4. But one stat that's really amazed me, and I'm like you, Peter, I say, well, we've got a reasonable visitor economy here, and I don't know what our stat is in terms of New Zealand, but we bat pretty well, I think 11 or 12, and then I'm at regional meetings and they talk about Ruapehu and Wanganui. With all due respects, they're number 30 and 31. So people are surprised by that, but we don't highlight the amount of visitors that come through the city. Is that because the numbers are just a bit all over the place at the moment?
We had the curious data for a period of time, and then that stopped, and now some new data is becoming available, but we don't have a long time series for it.
We were previously extrapolating the data from Curious, which closed in 2018, but beyond 2020 it got a little bit dicey to do that. It's a national issue and there are national data huis and with government involvement, but to be honest, we're still woefully behind the rest of the world in this space.
Okay. And just, I know it's an executive summary, but you gloss over two big sectors which really add, I'd say, visitors to us, is events and sort of that education slash research sectors that bring lots of people here. Is that on purpose? Is it just a light touch, or is there something that's to come or missing?
No, really, just how much we can fit into 4 pages. But there's more detail in...
It's pure honesty, thanks, Peter.
There's much more detail in the profile. But,
right, okay, excellent. Thank you.
Just a question from me. The data sources on pages 45 and 46, do we pay for those data sources?
Sorry?
So the data sources, there's a mix there. So some of them are free and some of them are ones that CEDA subscribe to. I guess through our RTO and EDA function to sort of monitor sentiment and travel patterns to help inform our marketing particularly, but also destination development. And then there's a lot of the free data through MB and Stats New Zealand that we use, and the new commercial accommodation monitor is a subscription model across the regions.
Because that informs a lot of this information, of that
Hugely,
data, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I think there's so many data sources because the data's so light, there's not one source of truth in this sector, and again, because it makes accounts like, retail and hospitality, it's quite a mixed bag, particularly for our region. It's not, pure tourism product. So yeah, we do have a lot of data sources, but they're all really valuable and we're always assessing those.
So when you look at someone coming in for an event, like say a sporting event, where would you get that data from for the sporting event?
So Sport Manawatu.
Well, but also the Market View electronic card data captures that, and there's also the phone data that's being used to estimate how many non-residents are here on a daily basis.
Okay, so it would be captured?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Peter and Janet, for the hard work that's gone into this. Really well presented. I have a question around page 11 of the profile, which is page 47 of our agenda papers. It's a lovely multicolored chart of Aotearoa with all the percentages there. And there's quite a few zeros. And I'm just trying to understand, is that kind of percentage of our visitor pool, or is it the percentage of the source district that visits us?
That's the number should add up to 100, so that's where our visitors come from. So there aren't many, in Ruapehu district's a small population, so there will be some people come here, but they're smaller in proportion to the total.
Thanks. I guess that's leads to my primary question there, which is, did we consider kind of flipping it on its head? Because, yeah, if you got 5 people to visit from Ruapehu, it would actually be a percentage of them, but it's not a percentage of our total pool, and it might actually paint a fuller picture of what's happening.
Yeah, I think, again, this is pulled from one data source, and then we married that up with both the commercial accommodation nights, which previously has only accounted for 30% of actual stays in our region, but also the visitor spend and where that's coming from. And so I guess there's sort of sequencing we have to look at to help inform who we're targeting and why, but also, I guess, the low-hanging fruit. We know Wellington's really high value, so we focus on them more than Ruapehu. We know we can get Wellingtonians to convert into a few nights versus Ruapehu, for example. So yeah, it's not a perfect science in terms of how we interpret the data.
Thanks. So I guess, so if you were to flip it and look at regional sources of visitors to Palmerston North and to the Manawatu, would it be safe to say there wouldn't be any zeros there?
Yeah,
It's also about geography. If you live in Wellington, you don't have a lot of options unless you spend lots of money to cross the water. So we are in a fortunate position, and the visitor flows are, people don't travel far for those short breaks through the year, and so our largest amount of expenditure comes from the areas that are closest to us. Whereas Ruapehu has residents of Ruapehu have more options in terms of where they can go for that short break.
I guess I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, apologies, but obviously a lot of the lower South Island, we do see 0%. It doesn't mean we get 0 visitors from them. I think this is a high level overview. So we could do a bit more of a deep dive and maybe update on that if that was of interest.
Thank you for those responses. I'll probably leave that line of questioning there. My other primary question was just around the last 2 years would be a very interesting 2 years to draw any conclusions about visitors and tourism anywhere on the planet, including here in the Manawatu, and just kind of want to know what steps broadly you took to acknowledge that it's a time like no other, and then how that was communicated through here to identify kind of longer real trends versus short-term COVID things.
The border closures have been good for around 2/3 of regions because New Zealanders have been spending more money locally than they do normally. So around 2/3 of regions have seen a growth in tourism spending over the last 2 years, and only 1/3 of regions have seen a substantial fall. So that is going to rebalance again once New Zealanders are now starting to travel. But so far, the retail spending for the city's still looking very good.
And I suppose that's my fundamental question. Are we then painting a realistic picture here, or are we contextualizing it in a way that recognizes some of those factors that were beyond our control but drove some trends like we've never seen driven before?
Because I think the previous tourism sector profile was over a decade old. So yes, it was challenging doing it at this time, but I think we thought we were kind of through the most of the volatility, and for our region that hadn't been as dramatically impacted through COVID. But I think in another 2 to 3 years, this could look quite different, particularly with you know, the flip of the card spending that we've got on page 16, where you can see, you know, the big golden tourism destinations are in the negative. I think we'll see some evening out of that.
Cool. Great, thank you both for those, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thanks very much. There's no more questions. So thank you very much, Janet and Peter, for this report. Thank you. I'll look to move the report, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Thank you. We'll move into comment. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Janet, and I know it's a subsector that you really concentrate on at CEDA for us, so it's very special, and thank you, Peter, for your comments. It's timely that we do this work, because I think this sector has been underrated for so long, and we as a council can be an enabler for it as well. The events, and I look at the emerging destination and the natural visitor attractions here are really so underrated when you look at the Te Apiti Manawatu Gorge, the native wildlife, the outdoor recreation that's available. That's quite special for people visiting here for the first time, or even our friends and family. And the work that the council's done around Hiara Kotahi, some of those pathways, and what we're about to experience at Te Apiti, I think is going to make us hopefully get very close to a great walk. It's really going to have some impact for us, and will start to appear on imagery as Hiara Kotahi has. But I don't think we can underestimate conferences and business events. And just speaking to John Lynch yesterday, it is the busiest we have ever been going forward in the next 6 months. Just give you a snapshot of some of the things we are hosting. Of course, we know we've got the New Zealand Local Government Conference and Awards, 700 plus delegates. New Zealand Property Investors Conference, the New Zealand Food Awards, which will be 400 to 500 seat dinner. We had the Downers Contractors New Zealand Conference. We've got the New Zealand Airports Conference. We've got the New Zealand Aquatic Conference. And not to be outdone, we've got the New Zealand Filipino Forum as well, which a council has probably helped us with. But it just shows you the depth and breadth of conferences and events that are coming to us. But look, I think also, if you said to somebody 500,000 people passed through, just prior to COVID, 500,000 people were coming through the city in a visitor capacity. It's quite amazing. And I just see on that last, one of the last pages there in conclusions, page 42, is that the workforce increased by 17% as well. So it's pretty positive stuff, which, as you say, some areas that really rely on tourism have struggled. So sometimes it's best not to be top of the pops. So thank you for that, and it's a great profile.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was going to do a quick comment myself. I think it is a very, very good profile. And one of our natural attractions, which we don't talk about a lot of, is the plaza. A lot of people come to Palmerston North for the plaza, to shop in the plaza. And it is really underrated, but people come from all of the district to shop at the plaza. So we can't just talk about the Te Apiti, we can also talk about the plaza as a shopping destination. So I'll now go to Councillor Barrett, who will just say the exact opposite to what I have just said, but thank you very much for the report. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to confirm, I was reflecting with my colleague that my brother and sister-in-law recently visited from Wellington, and one of the star attractions was some shopping at the plaza. So well done, Madam Chair, and well done to the economist who did point out that we make a wonderful butterfly net for catching all those people heading north from Wellington. This is a really great step in terms of getting an updated profile, and really appreciate the hard work that people have done to get this to us and so well presented. obviously a tricky time to do this in terms of COVID, but probably the one area that I would highlight is that lovely multicolored chart on page 11 of the report. So it's got about 25 or 30 different regions picked out across the country. And if you just look at the numbers there, it suggests that 12 of those regions, nobody comes to visit. And I don't think that's actually the case. I think if we looked afresh at those numbers, we would see that the answer to where visitors to the Manawatu region come from would be everywhere. And it'd be really nice if we could find a way to present that data in a way that does reflect that, because yes, while 0% of our visitors may be from Lake Wanaka, that probably doesn't actually mean 0 visitors from Lake Wanaka. So that'd be my only recommendation, informal, in terms of if we could improve things before this goes through to final print and production. But overall, a really great asset for the community, and again, thanks to the team that pulled this together. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. And Councillor Hancock slipped into the queue.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Look, I just wondered if Peter and Janet perhaps have got any comments they want to make about the government sector profile, which is actually included in this item. We seem to have talked about the tourism sector profile, but not the government sector profile.
It's probably a little bit late now to go back and talk about it.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll come back another day and talk about it.
We don't normally talk on the profiles, but I just wanted to highlight the tourism one that locals sort of understand that.
Maybe another day we'll talk about the governance one. Thank you.
My comments then, sorry, Madam Chair, is that the government sector profile was actually very useful to read. It's and obviously is a big contributor to the economy of Palmerston North.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hancock. Great.
Still even it up. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we'll look to vote. Thank you. That's passed unanimously. Thank you for that, and thank you, CEDA team. Right, we're looking at item number 11. Councillor Beattie, have you got any comments on item number 11?
I'll take it as read, but the only comment I'll make is that it's disappointing to see that although we've added some units to Papaioa, that our waiting list has still increased, so it still shows you the critical nature of housing in our city. So that's all I'll highlight. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Okay. Any other comments on that? Questions to the author? No? Would you like to move it, Councillor? Move it. And seconded by Councillor Barrett. Right. Any comments, other comments on that? No, we'll look to vote. Thank you. Right, we will go to the work schedule, and I'll hand over to you, Mr. Murphy.
No comment, it's just the usual spread of update reports around international relations, economic reporting and sector profiles to come.
Oh, sorry, I didn't, I'm being whispered in the ear of, so did you say anything? So has anybody got, okay, we have got, right, okay, sorry, Mr. Mayor. You know what it's like when someone whispers in your ear and you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly. Thank you, Madam Chair. David, just with the sector profiles, we've just seen Peter exiting. Who's doing that work now?
So Kian's role will contribute to those, but we're also in the process of recruiting a city economist to replace Peter. So we went out for a first round of recruitment, unsuccessful, so we've just shortlisted for interviewing. So we anticipate that the city economist will pick up those roles with Kian providing support.
Right, okay, thank you.
Fantastic. Any other comments on the, okay. We'll look to move that by Councillor Dennison, seconded by Councillor Barrett. No other comments, and we will look to vote. Right, yippee, we're finished. Why not? Have I got anything else? Uh-huh. Okay, I now see what you mean. Okay, we're going to have a 20-minute break because we have got quite a few things that have come through for the next meeting. So we just need 20 minutes to get them prepared over this side over here. So we'll be back in how many?
2:45, back in the chamber, ready to go, completing committee of council. Thank you.